Working Americans and their families are being hammered by the worst inflation in 40 years, and Washington Democrats own it. Sometimes it can be difficult to directly connect Washington policies to the downstream effects on our families. Sometimes it can be tricky to identify cause and effect, but not this time, not in this case. The pain that families are feeling today was not just foreseeable, it was actually foreseen by experts all across the political spectrum. Economists said this inflation is exactly what would happen if Democrats pushed ahead with their reckless spending sprees the economy simply did not need. Larry Summers, who was Treasury Secretary for President Clinton and ran the National Economic Council for President Obama, warned Democrats a year ago, this week, that Democrats' far-left plans could trigger, quote, inflationary pressures of a kind we've not seen in a generation. Jason Furman, who chaired President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, said the very same thing. He said the Democrats' spending binge was, quote, definitely too big for the moment. I don't know any economist that was recommending something the size of what was done. That's Jason Furman, President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors. But our Democratic colleagues do not let families' actual needs restrain their radical daydreaming. They had already made up their minds. This temporary pandemic was to serve as a Trojan horse for permanent socialism. Remember, right from the start, in March of 2020, with Americans dying from this new mysterious virus, the top House Democrats called it, quote, a tremendous opportunity to restructure things to fit our vision, end quote. So the new Democratic Party's government's first major act was to start printing, borrowing, and spending money like there was no tomorrow. They managed to blow through roughly $2 trillion on a so-called COVID bill that utterly failed to crush the virus. Less than 9% of the money went to a health care fight at all. Even the liberal expert Steve Ratner, former Obama official, said the spending spree was Democrats', quote, original sin, end quote, when it comes to inflation. And working Americans are paying dearly for it every single day. Just look at the headlines. Quote, 2021 went down as the worst year for inflation since 1982. Higher prices seeped into just about everything households and businesses buy. There's no telling when prices will fall to more sustainable levels. Further quotes, rising costs for food, rent, and other necessities are heightening the financial pressures on Americans' households. Rising prices have wiped out the healthy pay increases that many Americans have been receiving, making it harder for households, especially lower-income families, to afford basic expenses. Yes, it is true that inflation is up all around the world. This is partially a global phenomenon, but the United States has it worse than almost everyone else. Data from Pew show that America's inflationary spike has been the third worst among all countries they measured. We have it worse than any other country in the G12, much worse inflation than the UK, or France, or Australia, or Japan. That's what this agenda has brought us. And Americans are afraid this may still just be the beginning. 79% of Americans now expect inflation will get even worse over the next 6 months. Now the Democratic-caused inflation has the Federal Reserve signaling they may need to raise interest rates higher and faster than they'd expected. This brings its own set of risk upon the American people, and again, it's exactly what experts predicted. A full year ago this week, the economist Michael Strain testified that Democrat spending could corner the Fed and force them to clamp down on the recovery sooner than necessary. Democrats had mainstream economic experts warning against their reckless spending plans, and still decided to drive right over the cliff. Working families are paying the price every day at the checkout counter, at the gas pump, at the used car lot, when they pay their bills, when they look for housing. And now Washington Democrats are trying again to revive talk of yet another reckless bout of spending this year. American families are already hurting enough. They need that bad idea to stay buried.